stores and small businesses shutting down.
Very difficult because everything runs on LPG.
Supply shortage, hoarding or panic buying.
अभी कोई भी 3000 दे तुरंत सिलेंडर मिलेगा.
What's the government doing to control the crisis?
So the question is whether India is prepared.
News9 ground reports.
Growing uncertainty over the availability of LPG in the national capital.
We are here at the ground. News9 will be tracking the problems of the people.
But the people that we spoke to on ground have a different story to tell.
Will be continuous coverage.
Continuous coverage on News9 in your interest.
In Tamil Nadu, the battle over language returns.
ஒரே மொழி பேசுகிறோம், ஒரே எதிர்காலத்தை நோக்கி நடக்கிறோம்.
Election about identity, loyalty.
Bye bye Stalin.
Dravida model versus double engine की सरकार.
बीजेपी एनडीए की डबल इंजन सरकार बनना तय है.
The stakes are high.
From the ground, the questions that matter, the voices that shape the vote. India votes only on News9. This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9. English news as it should be.
Good morning. You are watching News9. This is Morning Brief at 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. A quick look at all the headlines we're tracking for you this morning. US President Donald Trump warns Iranian attack boats approaching US naval forces will be destroyed as tensions rise in Hormuz despite global calls for a ceasefire. Iran slams Washington's naval blockade around its ports as a violation of sovereignty, with rhetoric escalating on both sides amid a fragile two-week truce. US Vice President JD Vance says Washington has set clear red lines for peace with Iran, adding it is now up to Tehran to respond in efforts to end the conflict. China cautions the United States against imposing a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz and warns against interference in China-Iran relations. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the UK will not participate in the US-led blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. US President Donald Trump removes a social media post depicting himself as Jesus Christ after backlash from religious leaders. Meanwhile, Russia offers to take custody of Iran's enriched uranium as Tehran reportedly considers pausing nuclear activity for 5 years. Iran assures India its oil tankers are not being charged for passage through the Strait of Hormuz, offering assistance for navigation amid tensions. And the European Union agrees to double tariffs on foreign steel, aiming to protect its struggling industry from a surge in cheap imports, particularly those from China. And let's start with the developing story on the Strait of Hormuz and the U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports. That's right, the United States has begun enforcing a naval blockade on Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz after failed talks in Islamabad over the weekend. The two-week ceasefire continues to hold, at least between U.S. and Iran for now. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Monday that Iran is still seeking a deal, but Washington will not accept any agreement that allows Tehran to develop nuclear weapons.
Has the blockade started, sir?
Yeah, started 10 o'clock. President Donald Trump said a U.S. military blockade of ships leaving Iran's ports had begun on Monday, as Tehran threatened to retaliate against its Gulf neighbors' ports after peace talks failed to end the conflict over the weekend.
If they don't agree, there's no deal. There'll never be a deal.
Outside the Oval Office, Trump said Iran had been in touch on Monday and wanted to make a deal, but that he will not approve any agreement that allows Tehran to have a nuclear weapon.
We're not going to let that happen.
Earlier, Trump warned that any Iranian fast attack ship that goes near the U.S. maritime blockade would be, quote, eliminated. U.S. Central Command said the blockade would be, quote, enforced impartially against vessels of all nations entering or leaving Iranian ports in the Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. 2 Iranian-linked tankers laden with oil products left the strait on Monday before the deadline, LSEG data shows. An Iranian military spokesperson called any U.S. restrictions on international shipping piracy. NATO allies, including Britain and France, said they would not be drawn into the conflict by taking part in the blockade. Instead, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer told Parliament on Monday that he and French President Emmanuel Macron will convene a summit of leaders to, quote, ensure freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz.
And let me be very clear. This is about safeguarding shipping and supporting freedom of navigation once the conflict ends.
Iranian political analyst Mohammad Ghaddari said the U.S. blockade will only lift energy prices again.
Look, when the other side wants to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, logically surrounding it only adds another problem. But what is Trump's argument? His argument is that if Iran wants to prevent passage through the strait, then he will prevent Iran's passage in a much wider area. This does not solve America's problem. Yes, it imposes pressure on Iran, but it does not resolve America's problem. What does this mean? It means that the story of the escalating rise in energy prices will continue.
Trump announced the blockade after discussions in Islamabad between the sides over the weekend failed to reach a final agreement, including on lifting an Iranian threat to strike cargo ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Those talks came after Tehran and Washington agreed last week to a 2-week ceasefire. But on Sunday, Washington said Tehran rejected its demands, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said they had encountered, quote, maximalism, shifting goalposts, and blockade from the United States at the talks. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said efforts were still on to resolve the conflict.
And now China has issued a strong warning to the United States, cautioning against any move to block the Strait of Hormuz. A senior Chinese official said Beijing opposes interference in its ties with Iran and stressed the need to keep the key waterway open. The Strait of Hormuz is critical for China, supplying nearly 40% of its oil imports and around 30% of its LNG needs. Now, Beijing says ensuring safe and uninterrupted navigation through the route is in the global interest, especially at a time of rising tensions.
霍尔木兹海峡是重要的国际货物和能源贸易通道，维护该地区的安全稳定和畅通，符合国际社会共同利益。海峡通航受阻的根源在于伊朗战事，解决这一问题的出路是尽快停火止战。各方应该保持冷静和克制，中方愿继续发挥积极建设性作用。
And even the European Union has raised serious concerns over the Strait of Hormuz blockade, warning of its impact on global stability. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the disruption to shipping is greatly damaging, stressing that restoring freedom of navigation is of paramount importance.
The ongoing closure of the Strait of Hormuz is greatly damaging, and the restoration of the freedom of navigation is of paramount importance for us. Since the beginning of the conflict, 44 days ago, our bill for fossil fuel imports has increased by over 22 billion euros. 44 days, 22 billion euros, not a single molecule of energy in addition. And this shows the enormous impact this crisis has on our economy.
And not just EU and China, Russia has also sharply criticized the US decision to block maritime access to Iranian ports, warning it could destabilize global markets. The Kremlin said the move by US President Donald Trump to enforce a blockade in the Strait of Hormuz is likely to further tighten an already strained energy market, pushing prices higher and increasing volatility.
Ну, скорее всего, такие действия продолжат негативно влиять на международные рынки. Это можно предположить с большой долей уверенности. Но тут многие детали остаются неясными, непонятными, поэтому я бы сейчас воздержался от каких-то субстантивных комментариев.
Meanwhile, Russia is ready to take in Iran's enriched uranium as part of a future peace deal with the United States, the Kremlin said on Monday. Russia, which possesses the world's largest stockpile of nuclear weapons, has repeatedly offered to host Iran's enriched uranium as part of any peace deal. The proposal was voiced by Russian President Vladimir Putin in contacts with both the United States and regional states. The offer still stands but has not been acted upon, according to the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov. And amid rising tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has denied charging any toll from Indian ships. Iran's envoy to India, Mohammad Fatah, said Indian tankers passing through the strait have not paid anything, even as Tehran maintains that the waterway falls within its territorial control. Now, speaking in New Delhi, the envoy described India as a friend, highlighting strong ties and ongoing communication between the two countries during the conflict. The Iranian envoy also indicated that Iran may introduce a mechanism to regulate ship movement through the strait, even as it signaled openness to oil trade with countries willing to engage. Now, the situation underscores the growing complexity in the region, with strategic waterways, energy flows, and diplomatic positions all coming into play. And global markets are reacting sharply after the United States moved to impose a blockade on Iranian shipping. Oil prices surged on Monday as investors priced in fresh supply disruptions following the collapse of weekend peace talks. At the same time, the US dollar strengthened, reflecting the flight to safety, while equities and bond markets all came under pressure. Take a look.
Oil prices surged more than 7% on Monday. It jumped after the US got ready to impose a blockade on Iranian shipping after peace talks collapsed over the weekend. The move could restrict Iran's oil exports and aims to put pressure on Tehran. It also leaves a fragile ceasefire in the balance. Brent crude futures were up at $102 a barrel by early European time. Oil has risen more than 40% since the war shut navigation of the Strait of Hormuz. The dollar also rose early Monday, while stocks and bonds fell. Both Asian and European bourses were down slightly. Europe's stock 600 dropped just under 1% in early trade. Investors will now wait to see if the US begins more strikes on Iran. The Wall Street Journal reported Trump and his advisors were weighing limited strikes. Trump said on Sunday the price of oil and gasoline might stay high into November's midterm elections in the US. One leading analyst said there were growing worries about inflation, and that could get worse the longer the oil shock lasts. It's led markets to prepare for central banks to move towards raising rates. It's a sharp turn from pre-war bets on rate cuts or a prolonged pause.
And oil prices have since corrected, with the Brent trading around $98.40 a barrel overnight, and the US-based WTI a dollar lower at about $97.50. Meanwhile, Wall Street kicked off the week on a strong note, with the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite both rising over 1%. Investor sentiment remained uplifted on hopes of a possible breakthrough in West Asian conflict, even as weekend talks between the United States and Iran failed to deliver results. Markets also looked ahead to the start of the earnings season, with expectations that corporate results could set the tone for the weeks ahead.
Wall Street's main indexes rallied on Monday, with the Dow gaining more than 0.6%, the S&P 500 climbing 1%, and the Nasdaq adding nearly 1.25%. After a muted start to the day, stocks picked up steam midday after President Donald Trump said Iran wants to make a ceasefire deal, which he said could not include Tehran having nuclear weapons. Still, just the hint of a near-term truce reignited investor optimism, said Kevin Mann, President and Chief Investment Officer at Henyon & Walsh Asset Management.
Each time there is a ceasefire announcement or the prospect for an ultimate resolution in the Middle East go up, well, then you see oil prices come down, inflation forecasts come down, yields come down, and markets start to go back up. And we continue to go back and forth with those two camps each passing day. And until we receive that ultimate resolution, we're not going to receive or see a sustainable recovery in the equities market or the bond markets. But investors believe, in my opinion, that likelihood is high, or else we would see the market selling off much more than they are right now.
The S&P 500 had fallen as much as 7.8% since the war in Iran began in late February. But by Monday's close, the benchmark index had erased those losses, closing 0.1% higher than its February 27th finish. Stocks on the move Monday included Allogene Therapeutics, which hit its highest level in over 2 years earlier in the session before ultimately settling 12.5% higher. Investors poured in after interim data from a mid-stage study showed that the company's blood cancer therapy reduced the risk of relapse in patients. Shares of Albemarle, the world's largest lithium producer, gained nearly 7%, after Oppenheimer raised its price target on the stock. On the flip side, concerns about higher oil prices pressured airline stocks, with United Airlines, Delta, and American all seeing losses.
All right, and from the U.S. markets, let's take a look at Asian markets, which have opened on a very, very positive note this morning, taking that knock-on effect from the U.S. talks. And look at the figures on the screen right now. South Korea's Kospi is up more than 3.25%, trading at levels just below 6,000 points. Meanwhile, Japan's Nikkei 225 also showing handsome gains this morning, up about 2.4%. Taiwan's TAIEX also showing solid resilience at over 2% gains over yesterday's close. Meanwhile, Hong Kong and China both trading pretty much flat, a gap up, one would call it, with the Hang Seng up about 0.5 percentage point, and the Shanghai Composite also up almost 0.4%, a little over that, trading at levels above 4,000. That's the mood on Asian markets, which have opened to healthy gains this morning, with the ceasefire holding and a correction in oil prices that came in overnight. Meanwhile, Indian markets remain closed today owing to Ambedkar Jayanti, but yesterday saw a massive correction, of course, given the naval blockade on the Strait of Hormuz and the potential of disrupted oil flows into India, with the Sensex and the Nifty both tanking a little under 1%. Sensex was down about 700 points in yesterday's trade, closing the day at levels of 76,847. The Nifty 50 also down more than 200 points in trade yesterday, closing at 23,842. Volatility on the Indian stock markets closed the day at a little over 20 points. And back to the conflict in West Asia. Israeli forces have launched a major ground assault in southern Lebanon, targeting a key town held by Hezbollah. The operation aims to capture a strategic stronghold near the border as Israel intensifies its campaign against the Iran-backed group. Now, the offensive comes just hours before rare talks between Israeli and Lebanese representatives, marking one of the first such engagements in decades.
Warplanes streaked over South Lebanon on Monday as Israeli troops tried to seize a key town from Hezbollah fighters on the eve of rare talks between Israeli and Lebanese government envoys. An Israeli military spokesperson said the army had encircled the town of Bint Jbeil near the border and begun a ground assault. Lebanese sources said Hezbollah fighters holed up inside were ready to fight to the death. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday said the assault was part of a broader operation to push the Iranian-backed Hezbollah fighters away from the border. He said he envisaged, quote, a solid, deeper security zone that would prevent infiltration and rocket attacks. The conflict between Israel and Hezbollah erupted again when the group based in Lebanon opened fire on Israel after Israel attacked the group's sponsor, Iran. Israel responded with punishing airstrikes on Hezbollah targets as well as residential neighborhoods in the capital, Beirut. Israel has said that while it will adhere to a 2-week ceasefire the U.S. reached with Iran, it will continue to operate in Lebanon. Meanwhile, in Washington, the ambassadors of both Lebanon and Israel were set to meet on Tuesday, a rare face-to-face encounter between countries still in a formal state of war. But the outlook for the sit-down is uncertain. Israel has said it won't discuss a ceasefire, while Hezbollah has objected to negotiations with Israel.
And with that, let's slip into a short break. Coming up on the other side, India's retail inflation print for the month of March is out. We'll give you the numbers. You're watching News9.
Others see a teenage tantrum. I see you standing your ground. I see you, my daughter. 16 and already owning your story. And I couldn't be more proud. For you, only natural diamonds.
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया.
Sometimes I'm confused. Sometimes distracted. Still, I chase my dreams. I raise my voice for what I believe in. Winning at life is my habit. Yes. My life is in my hands. Senco presents Bangal Utsav.
Welcome back. You're watching News9. This is the Morning Brief at 9. Well, US President Donald Trump on Monday deleted a social media image apparently depicting him as Jesus after an outcry from religious leaders that he was being blasphemous. Now, the image posted on Trump's Truth Social platform showed him in flowing red and white robes, touching the forehead of what appeared to be a sick man with light shining from his hand and head. An American flag waved in the background while various figures gazed up at the president in reverence. Now, the post generated an outcry from a series of prominent conservative Christians who are among Trump's biggest backers. Take a look.
I stand with the Pope. I mean, the Pope speaks the gospel. He speaks for peace.
It's terrible. It's gross. It's blasphemous. It's his usual.
U.S. President Donald Trump was met with criticism from the public and world leaders Monday after his weekend feud with Pope Leo. The two had clashed over crime, policing, and the U.S. war with Iran. On Monday, Trump doubled down, saying he wouldn't apologize and called the Catholic leader wrong on issues of law and order.
We believe strongly in law and order, and he seemed to have a problem with that, so there's nothing to apologize for. He's wrong.
Alongside the feud, Trump also posted an AI-generated image of himself as a Jesus-like figure on Sunday, drawing widespread criticism even from some religious conservatives who typically support him, before deleting the post on Monday.
I don't think he cares who he goes up against, I don't know. We got to do better.
That was bad, really bad.
I will pray for him. That's all I can say.
Speaking to reporters Monday, Trump said he thought the image portrayed him as a doctor.
I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better.
Short.
And Europe's top luxury brands are seeing a sharp slowdown in key Gulf hubs like Dubai and Abu Dhabi as the Iran conflict dents demand in what was once the industry's fastest growing region. The downturn marks another blow to the nearly $400 billion global luxury sector, which has already been under pressure and shrinking over the past 3 years.
Sales at Europe's biggest luxury brands have declined in Dubai and Abu Dhabi as the Iran conflict hit the sector's fastest growing market. It's the latest setback for the $400 billion industry, whose value has contracted over the last 3 years, and a sign of the conflict's impact on the luxury sector. At the Mall of the Emirates, one of Dubai's largest, luxury brands reported 30 to 50% sales declines in March, compared to the same month last year. That's according to a source with knowledge of the previously unreported figures. The source also said the number of shoppers visiting the Mall of the Emirates was down 15% in March, while foot traffic at the larger Dubai Mall was down around 50%, which could mean a potentially even larger sales drop. In Abu Dhabi, a smaller shopping hub than Dubai, March sales at the Galleria Mall were more resilient, but still down around 10% across the board, according to an industry source. None of the companies responsible for operating the Mall of the Emirates, Dubai Mall, or Galleria Mall replied to a Reuters request for comment. The Middle East accounts for roughly 5% of global luxury consumption. Analysts say it has been one of the luxury industry's rare bright spots, reporting double-digit annual revenue growth in recent years. But Dubai's carefully curated image of glamour and stability has been shaken by the Iran conflict, with the city's major airport and other infrastructure targeted by Iranian drone attacks.
And moving on now to other stories, India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri is on a key diplomatic visit to Europe with stops in Paris and Berlin aimed at strengthening strategic partnerships. Now, Misri arrived in Berlin on Tuesday after holding high-level talks in Paris as part of ongoing India-Europe engagement. In Berlin, the Foreign Secretary will co-chair the India-Germany Foreign Office consultations with State Secretary of the German Foreign Office. The discussions would cover diverse domains of bilateral cooperation, including trade and investments, defense and security, technology, green energy and education, as well as global and regional matters of mutual interest. The visit follows German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's recent trip to India last year and reflects continued high-level engagement between the countries. And in macroeconomic news, India's retail inflation for the month of March has come in hot at 3.4%, with the impact of the West Asia crisis now visible in numbers. At 3.4% in March, inflation is higher than February's sequential 3.21%, according to government data released on Monday. Rural inflation recorded a year-on-year rise of 3.63%. Urban inflation, however, remained slightly lower at 3.11%. Food inflation, which is measured by the All India Consumer Food Price Index, stood at a much higher 3.87%, with rural India recording a 3.96% jump compared to 3.7% higher prices for urban India. Now, on the Thalinomics front, onion prices fell indeed by over 27%, while potato prices saw a dip of nearly 19%. Prices of garlic, pulses like ahar or tur dal and chickpeas also declined, providing relief to consumers. But the massive spike in cost of cooking gas and its low availability have burnt a hole in the pockets of consumers. Non-food items also remained extremely high. Silver jewelry inflation was recorded at around 148%. Gold and diamond jewelry prices rose nearly 46%. The housing inflation for the month of March was provisionally estimated at 2.11%. Within this category, rural housing inflation was higher at 2.54%, while urban housing inflation stood at 1.95%. Food and beverages inflation stood at 3.71%, while education services saw a 3.3% rise. Transport inflation remained surprisingly almost flat, with personal care and miscellaneous goods recording higher inflation at over 18% in some cases. Inflation among the states with population over 5 million was varied as well. Telangana recorded the highest combined inflation at 5.83%, followed by states like Karnataka and Kerala with higher than average rates. In contrast, states like Chhattisgarh and Delhi reported relatively lower inflation. Now remember, the next CPI data for April 2026 will be released on the 12th of May. In its April monetary policy review, remember, the Reserve Bank of India said headline inflation has stayed below its target so far, mainly because food prices have been favorable and core inflation has remained under control. However, recent data shows a gradual rise. Now, for the first quarter, that's Q1 of FY27, inflation is estimated at 4%. It is then expected to rise to 4.4% in quarter 2 and further to 5.2% in quarter 3. In the fourth quarter, inflation by the RBI is projected to ease slightly to 4.7%. And with that, we come to an end of this edition. Thank you so much for watching. News continues on the other side.
When you're hot, we'll cool you down on Cool Street. On Cool Street. On Cool Street. Ooh, I'm cool. Chill your bill. I'm cool. Chill your bill. I'm cool. Chill your bill.
Amid a fragile ceasefire, stakeholders take on the tough questions.
Was Israel surprised by the asymmetric warfare which Iran started conducting?
Yes, I think it was a kind of surprise, the level of savagery.
Why has Iran stopped the traffic in the Strait of Hormuz?
So we have to defend ourselves.
Like never before, on point with Kartikeya Sharma, decoding Hormuz, Karg and the ceasefire.
What is the future of peace in West Asia?
I hope that they got their lesson. That are supposed to give a chance. We stay ready in case it doesn't work.
Every war has a political objective.
The voices that matter, only on News9. This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9. English news as it should be.